are they going to jump in and ask me to teach extra classes or shift me around last minute? And I really don't want that to happen. But I have no power. I have no control. I just work here. Yep. And all they have to do is not make me teach in the spring or summer or whatever, or pay me extra. Like, it's all good. Whatever. Like, I've told them this, and I've told them you need more online classes. Your students don't want to do everything online, but they want to do one class a term online.
Because I need time to be alive. God forbid. Because most people have to work.
Your need to eat and sleep is unacceptable.
I know, right? It's absolutely unacceptable. 8 hours a night. And be able to get everything in.
That would be nice. Okay, lights off. Oh, now I must teach. My rant must end. Namaste. Okay. So, where are we at here? I'm taking my... Okay, we've got lots left here. So my goal here today is just to get through the rest of qualitative interviewing as much as possible. If it so happens that we get through that before 3:20, I'm just going to call it. We're not going to start a new unit because we're a fair ways ahead of the ball at this point anyway. So I'm not too worried about, making sure we power through and get as much content in. So whatever we get through today, like if we get through qualitative interviewing, we'll stop. And it turns out, because my poor 15-year-old daughter is at home sick and she's not feeling very well. And what was her comment? My head hurts, hot, then too cold, can barely walk without having to sit. Coughing a lot and yawning starts coughing fits. My mind is so foggy and disoriented, it's hard to type. Okay, she's a bit of a drama queen. That's okay, she's 15, she's allowed. So I would like to get home as quick as I can to make sure she's not dead, which I'm sure she's fine. Okay, so I think we were talking interviews, right? I guess we ended off on this slide, and we were talking about recording and transcription. And I made the very bold, I gave you the very bold piece of advice that you should really, include in your ethics and in your documents, that you're going to use AI to transcribe, because transcribing is a miserable task. There's lots of different tools, and you can just Google AI transcription tools, and they come at very low costs. So lots of reasons to do that, right? And plus, especially like as you're starting out as a researcher, transcription is a pain. It takes forever. It takes hours to do it properly. And like I said, unless you really enjoy hearing the same 20-second sound clip 10 times before you finally get it transcribed, you probably don't need it. Now, one thing I will say, I have a friend who pushes back against this. And she's like, no, this is how you know your data. And they think this is a very important part of research, is knowing your data inside and out, right? And when you've transcribed it, you really do know it because you've spent countless hours going over it again and again and again. I'm just like, okay, like, do we have to know our data in a way that makes us miserable and makes our lives harder? I tend to think not, but there we go. Okay, so there we go. Flexibility in the interviews, right? So I've talked about this a few times. That interviewing is a bit of an art, right? And a lot of it is sort of figuring out the right flow, and no two interviews, like even if you have the same interview guide, right? The same script, the same list of questions, no two interviews are going to be the same, right? And so you really have to... I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm being dramatic now. I'm sorry. Metal cups on concrete floors. Okay, my tears of my students mug is too good because my student tears keep burning my mouth, and it's been like 2 hours since I made this. So why are your tears so hot? I don't know. What have I done to cause you so much pain? Yeah, so vary the order of your questions and all sorts of stuff like that. The other thing, right, that you might have to do occasionally is sort of improvise. Sometimes your recording equipment might not work, right? Or your phone battery, you're recording stuff on your phone and you forgot to charge it and your phone battery dies. Or maybe for whatever reason, right, despite the fact that you warned them and it's in your information and consent letter and they knew about it, they decide for whatever reason they don't want you to record this interview. So you kind of have to be flexible. One of the things you can do essentially is take like, I'll call them minutes, right? And then sort of try to reconstruct the interview from memory, right? If something fails with your recording equipment or whatever. Like I had one time, I was recording, I was doing a focus group and I was recording, and for whatever reason, the person who was what would I call her? She was basically helping me take field notes, and she was supposed to keep an eye on the recording, but she let the screen on the laptop shut down for whatever reason, and it went to sleep, and then the recording kind of paused, and then she was like, oh, we lost like a 5-minute period of the focus group. And so what we did is we went back, and both of us sat there, and we're like, okay, this is like the bookends, what do you remember from this section that we missed? And we kind of filled it in, right? So we kind of went from memory and reconstructed it, based on she had been taking field notes. So we kind of reconstructed our memory of what happened there. And so I have this section that's in highlight in the transcript that's highlighted in bright yellow. That's like, this is a reconstructed section from our memories of what was happening during this 5-minute period. So sometimes you got to figure that stuff out, right? Something breaks down, and you might just have to take notes on it and kind of reconstruct things as you go. Sometimes you have to kind of paraphrase quotes and be like, this is kind of what the person said, but we weren't recording, so I don't have an exact transcript. All of that stuff will happen, and you just kind of have to learn. Interviewing is a very dynamic process. People are really weird and fun and interesting and crazy and surprising, and technology sucks and breaks down all the time. So you just got to know that you're probably going to have to improvise and sort of figure it out at some point. Okay. Now, knowing when to switch off your recording equipment. There's some people that will include, okay, so there's some people that will include sort of your preamble and for lack of a better term, your postamble, right? Like when you're talking to a person before you start the recording and after, right? And they'll actually include that in their kind of data. So it's like, they might turn off the recorder so that a person feels like they can speak more freely than if they're being recorded. And sometimes they'll be like, okay, they'll shut off the recording, but they'll still take notes on what the person said and kind of, let's say, the debrief, right? So you're done your interview, and you do like a debrief with the person, and you just kind of thank them. And sometimes they'll keep talking, they'll keep telling you stuff. Some people will actually include that, and they will do this, reconstruct it without the recording, and use that. Now, I'm of the opinion, and again, there are different ways of thinking about this, that this stuff at the beginning, when you're introducing yourself, before you turn on the recording, and this stuff is all off the record, because once you turn off that recording, I think people expect that now that you're not recording, none of that is going to get reported. And that's always how I've treated it. Unless, if someone says something really juicy, I will ask them actively, hey, I know I stopped the recording. Could I include what you just said, in my quotes, right? Because I think like, wow, what you told me is just amazing. And then give them a choice whether they want to put it on the record or keep it off the record. Some people will just do it without asking, which I don't like, but I'm not the boss of everyone, so I don't get to make all the rules. There might be circumstances where if you get the sense that someone is not comfortable speaking because there's a recording, right? Maybe they're watching their words. You can ask them like, would you be more comfortable continuing if I didn't record this section, right? And then they might say yes or no, right? And then if you shut off the recording, again, I would say just be clear that you're still recording what's happening, right? You're still going to use what they say, but that's just you're not recording it. And then, yeah, you take notes immediately after the interview, try to reconstruct it before your memory starts to reshape that stuff, or you forget things, forget what and how people said certain things. Okay. Oh, scorching tears. Okay. I've been lecturing for an hour, so my throat is getting really dry, but my tea is too hot. I have terrible problems. Oh, I'm sure they'll work out. 3rd-degree burns and all. Okay. 3rd-degree burns are really bad, aren't they? It's the 1st-degree burns that aren't as bad? Okay. 1st-degree burns and all. It's not that bad. Okay. Okay. See, 1st sounds worse than 3rd. So I always get those two mixed up. Okay. So when you're transcribing and analyzing, right, you should be thinking about the interactions you had with people, how your interactions might have affected what people said, right? You should be looking for signs of, that ever-present reactivity. Was, the way you were acting, did that contribute to how people said things? Consider what people said, how they said it, right? Is there a tone? And you can note that in the transcription, right? If someone's obviously being sarcastic, you can put a little note, sarcastic tone. And if you think anything was left unsaid, right? If they were talking around an issue, you should be thinking about that as well. Okay. Oh no, my notes from last year are here. Hang on. I must fix this because it's going to bother me that I can't write new things and erase those ones. So I have to fix this. Give me 2 seconds. I recently learned how to erase ink in a document. Inspect a document. I'll be right back. I'm really sorry. I just can't have a slide where I can't write new things. Ink. Remove all. Close. Okay. Success. Whew. That was a close one. Oh, now I've destroyed everything. There we go. Okay. So, focus groups. So we're going to talk a little bit about focus groups. Focus group is a really common technique. And basically a focus group is a group interview, right? Where you have, typically, I would say the setup is you have, a moderator, which as the researcher is generally going to be you. Basically someone taking notes kind of about what's going on, kind of your live field note taker, and then participants, right? We'll talk about how many you should have in a sec. So I'm going to use a different color so you can see it. Focus groups, yeah, generally interview with a group of 4 or more people who can interact with one another and with the moderator or interviewer, right? So they're really useful, and especially in certain moments for certain settings, I think focus groups can be a really, really good tool, especially say I think at a master's or even a PhD level, for a lot of reasons. But I like them as generally as a tool. I think they're really useful overall. Not everybody loves focus groups, because one of the things that focus groups tend not to have is as much depth, right? Like if I sit down with one of you for a one-on-one interview and we talk for 2 hours, clearly I'm going to get more depth from each of you. And that, is generally a good thing. Focus groups have the maybe advantage of breadth, right? You talk to more people at the same time. So you get more kind of range of opinions maybe happening. So it gives you a bit more breadth without as much depth. The other thing you can see in focus groups is, meanings that develop during interactions with others rather than people in isolation. So how groups kind of pivot off of each other. I don't think that's the kind of main use of focus groups. But generally speaking, I think where you get, kind of useful perspectives in focus groups is a wide variety of perspectives, people kind of reflecting on what other people say and then adding their own insights, and they can be a really fun experience, right? It brings out what people say. Okay, so those are interesting things. The real advantages, though, of focus groups are two things, and they're two things I talk about a lot, but they're important when you're doing research because, unless you want to be doing research and, if you're an academic, that's fine, but if you have a goal of like getting a research project done, there are two things you have to think about. Time and money. So focus groups are, I think, quite efficient from a time perspective, and I think in a lot of ways they can be really efficient in a money perspective as well. So from a time perspective, you can get a large number of participants through a process relatively quickly with focus groups, right? And I don't want to, I'm trying to think how to put this. Let's say you want 40 participants, right? 40 interviews is going to take you a long time, right? Because you're going to go and sit down with, so you have to recruit people individually. You have to go sit down with them for an hour or two each. So you're going to 2 hours. That's 80 hours of interviews. Then you have to transcribe it, right? And that's a lot of work. That's going to take you a really long time to organize. You're probably going to have to travel to people or meet them in public places and do those interviews. To get 40 participants in focus groups, that's like 4 focus groups, right? That's 8 hours, maybe a little bit more. So you can do that much more efficiently from a time perspective. So in a lot of ways, they're really, really, really efficient. I've used them in the past on research projects where I had like hard timelines, and I was like, okay, I need a public opinion piece. I want some qualitative data. I want to get in and out. Focus groups are going to be the most efficient way for me to do that because basically, I did 6 focus groups and I did them in 3 weekends, right? So on Saturday, like I did 6 focus groups. I did an AM and PM one, 3 Saturdays in a row. And basically, in 3 weeks, I was done my data collection for that portion, right? And I did a 2 hours was it 2 hours? It doesn't really matter. I think it was about 2 hours in the morning and then a break and then 2 hours in the afternoon. And so in 3 weekends, I was done my qualitative data collection. So really efficient compared to other methods. Yeah, please. We will talk about that. Don't get ahead of me. No, I'm just kidding. What did I do? I killed the PowerPoint. What have I done? Okay, I'm just gonna go back and forth until everyone has a seizure and I have to go. No, I'm kidding. Okay. So, all right, we're talking about focus groups. The key player, right, in your focus group is, we don't tend to call them the interviewer, you call them the moderator or the facilitator, right? And you're facilitating the kind of discussion and conversation, often with questions, but you're also directing traffic, right? So, you're kind of paying attention to who's in the room, asking people, seeing if people have, making sure everyone has a chance to speak, because you're always going to have in any focus group somewhere between, I would say, 2 to 3 dominant players, right? Every focus group, it seems to come out this way. You have 2 or 3 people in the group that are really dominant. And probably they would be happy to do the whole focus group, just just those 2 or 3 people. They would answer every question. They have an opinion on everything. You love them, right? They are your best friends and you will shower them with affection in ways that you can scarcely imagine now. Because they make the whole thing run, right? If you have a whole group of people who don't want to say anything, it is really tough, and it's like pulling teeth in a focus group. Having those 2 to 3 people that really drive the conversation can make or break your focus group. And generally speaking, kind of naturally, you come up with that. So your job as the moderator or facilitator is to kind of direct the traffic, right, without steering too much, but also making sure that everybody has a chance to participate, right? And this is, pretty simple. I will say, when you're running a focus group, you're paying attention, right? You're paying attention the whole time. It's actually kind of exhausting because one of the things you're doing is you're tracking who's speaking, right? And you always have to be kind of mentally keeping an eye on what's going on, who's fidgeting, who maybe looks like they have something to say, but they're a little bit too shy, and just kind of directing traffic. And so like when I've done them, and I've done lots of focus groups, one of the things that you're kind of trying to do is like, okay, hey, I see that, John, I haven't really heard from you in a while. Is there anything you wanted to add? And then John has the choice of being like, oh yeah, I've been wanting to say this, or like, nah, I'm fine, I don't have anything to say, right? But you make sure that everyone has that chance to participate without forcing people to participate, right? You don't want to make people talk if they don't want to. But you're trying to give everybody a chance to speak. So certain kinds of focus groups, right? I guess they're naturalistic. If you're looking at, especially groups where people already know each other, right? If you're in that kind of a situation, focus groups can be very naturalistic. It can bring out kind of how people come to interpretations or make decisions kind of collectively. In other cases, it's just about kind of people giving their opinions and reflecting off of each other. Okay. Okay, so this is the I guess portion where I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff, and then I'm also then going to tell you that that's not always the case, right? So, because this is straight out of the textbook, researchers should conduct 10 to 15 groups. It depends. So, 10 to 15 groups is a lot. I would say, depending on the scope of the project, that could make sense. And I've been part of projects that were like this, right? I was part of one called Worldwide or Canada-wide Views, and they were doing focus groups of different people from across Canada on climate change, climate-related issues. They wanted kind of a diversity of opinions, and I think we had 20 groups, maybe a little bit more, from different parts of the country. It made sense in that context. Sometimes, okay, again, money can be an issue, time can be an issue as well. You might not get this many focus groups, and I don't think this should be taken as a hard and fast rule. The more diverse the population you're trying to understand, typically the more focus groups you should have. But again, some of this is going to be just judged on practicality, like what can you get reasonably based on the resources you have. Increasingly, right, this is becoming more expected that everyone who participates in your focus group gets a gift card of some value, like $25 or something like that. So financial resources, it can be a lot of money. Let's say you do 10 or 15 focus groups with 10 members each, right? Ends up being quite a bit of money. So you have to have the resources and figure out whether you can take that on. Even like, as a researcher, you're going to have to transcribe all this somehow. Did I make my mic just got out? Okay, sorry, it sounded like it. Maybe I'm losing my hearing. Transcription, because the battery's dying. So, and there are no other batteries other than dead batteries in this room. So I kind of suspect I threw that one. I could go to a different room. All right, that one still has a green light on it, so we're going to go with that one for now. I don't know why these aren't rechargeable in some way. Like, you think that the university could invest in, like, just have a little stand where you could recharge your microphones instead of running on AA batteries and slowly killing the planet. Oh, U of A, all of your war crimes against humanity. Okay. I kid, I love you. You pay my bills. I'm happy. Okay, so it can get really, really expensive, right? And your resources to do things like transcription can be limited as well, and so you have to judge all of that. Okay. I'm not sighing because I'm upset. I just have to tell you this. And I'm going to use this term that we've used a lot. Right, so we've been talking through the course, when we talk about qualitative research, about, not grounding theory. Oh my goodness, Broussard. Where's my brain? Grounded theory. I know I probably just could have corrected that without rewriting it. Right, grounded theory. So one of the things, with grounded theory, and this is kind of true of analytic induction as well, and again, we'll talk about those later. The idea with focus groups here, and this kind of big number, is that you keep going with focus groups until you get to theoretical saturation, right? Where you've heard it all. Where as a researcher, you can sort of predict what people are going to say, how the conversation's going to go, right? And you're no longer, no substantial new information is coming from your groups. Now, again, this kind of problematizes this number of 10 to 15 groups, because what if by group 5, you're like no longer getting new information? What if it's just kind of fallen apart after that point? Well, you would be okay to stop. So, as I said, we don't necessarily need 10 to 15 focus groups. Okay. So we're asking about size of groups. The size of groups question is a bit complicated. So it does depend on the topic and the goal of the research. Morgan recommends 6 to 10 people. Now I'm going to give you, I'm just going to give you pro tips because that's what I do. Here's the problem. You always have to over-invite for focus groups. Because inevitably, when you're doing your focus group, you set it up, you're like, Morgan's advice is good. I set up my focus group for 6 people. It's a nice number. And on the day of, 2 people show up. And you're screwed, right? Because 2 people is not enough to do a focus group. That's just like, you'd be better off than just stopping and being like, I'm going to interview each of you for an hour. And I'm just going to pivot off of this, and I'm going to interview each of you for an hour. And I kid you not, like I've seen this happen, where it's like, yeah, I'm going for like an 8-person focus group, and you get 3 people that show up, and then a bunch of people that ghost you, and they don't answer your text messages or your emails or whatever it happens to be. They just stop answering, and you have like no one show up. So ideally, I think this number is really good. In practice, there's a couple of things that can go wrong here. Like I'd say, if you're aiming for 6 to 10, you want to invite 12, right? And that's just like, because then you can have it where about half your people don't show up, and you still get your 6 people, right? And you're good, and that's fine, and you're happy, and everything's great-ish. Now, I've had it happen to me, right, where I invited, and this was barely workable, but I made it work anyway. I invited 10 people, and 4 people showed. And that was really awkward, but it actually turned out really great because I had Brandy. Brandy, the lesbian public school teacher. And Brandy, the lesbian public school teacher, had opinions about everything, and she talked and talked and talked and got the 3 other people in the focus group talking. I don't know why I remember her as this. I just remember that's how she introduced herself. She's like, I'm Brandy. I teach at Edmonton Public Schools, and I'm a lesbian. And I'm like, okay, Brandy, the lesbian public school teacher. I'm like, cool. That's how you identify. I'm good with it. But she like drove the whole thing. So it turned out okay. But I invited 10 people, and like I'm on the phoning people like, hey, are you coming? And they're like not answering. Or one guy was like, yeah, I just forgot to get out of bed. I didn't really want to come anyway. I'm like, why did you agree to come then? Bastard. I hate you. How did you get hit by a bus? No, I'm kidding. I was a little upset in the moment. I did not say that to him, but I was not happy. I'm like, well, if you didn't want to come, then why did you say you would? Oh, I really wanted the gift card. I'm like, great, thanks. Apparently not enough to show up, but whatever. So, the other thing that happened to me is I invited 12, because after this one, I was like, okay, I'm going to over-invite. I invited 12 people. 12 people showed up. Now I'm like, oh, shit. Now this is pretty big. Like now it's hard to hear all the voices in the room because now I've got way too many people in the room, right? It was really cramped. I had enough food and coffee, thank God, and drinks, because only 4 people showed up to this one, so we're fine. So I had lots of stuff left over. But, it's a little awkward when you invite 12 and 12 show up. You never quite know what's going to happen. I would say always over-invite in terms of what your kind of ideal number is, And then you're going to have inevitably a situation where you over-invite and everybody shows up, and one where you over-invite and almost no one shows up. And that's just kind of the reality of these sorts of things, right? They are a huge challenge. They're a coordination and logistics kind of nightmare. But, we make do with what we have. Okay. Small groups can have benefits, right? Controversial, complex, emotional topics can be talked about. People will tend to get more comfortable with each other than in a big group. Large groups are really interesting because okay, it's not in my head, right? Okay. Oh my gosh, sometimes I think I'm going crazy. I'm like, what does that sound? Isn't a small airplane trying to take off? Yeah, Paula.
Are focus groups better at facilitating like new topics coming about in comparison to like just a one-on-one interview, or is it kind of like
I think they're just different. They're just different, right? And the difference is mostly the depth, right? Versus the kind of broad opinion that you get. Like you'll get a lot of different opinions in focus groups that would take you a long time to gather in interviews versus like really, really in depth with a few people, right? So, I mean, you can go, what are they doing? I don't know. Okay. This university is against me. It's because I said bad things about them 5 minutes ago. They're like, we're going to go make noise outside your classroom. Haha. I don't know why it's so distracting. Possibly because it's the end of the day and my brain is, I know it's 2:30, but it's the end of my day. Okay. I don't know what I was talking about anymore. All right. Focus groups. I'm easily distracted, but that's okay. Big group. Yeah. So big groups, you can get a lot of dynamic interactions, a lot of different opinions. Smaller groups are a little bit more intimate. You can get into depth a little bit more, and people will tend to open up, a little bit more than they used to. Large groups, you can also have like huge problems in them. Some people will just hide. Some people are obnoxious, like interpersonally obnoxious, who come to your focus groups and can be really, really disruptive, and that's more likely in a big group. So, there's that. Okay. Now, just to show you the kind of diversity of the kind of studies that have been done that are focus groups, right? So, and again, to kind of suggest to you how much sometimes your best laid plans end up getting really screwed up. All right, so this one, I'm going to say that's Edie et al., right? So they did 8 focus groups, and the topic was bisexual people's experience with mental health services, right? Cool, fun, interesting topic. And you can see they did focus groups ranging in size from 3 to 9. Now, what can we take away from this? Almost assuredly that, the one that was 3, that's exactly what I was talking about a second ago. They invited a bunch of people, and a bunch of people didn't show up to their focus group, so they ended up with a really small focus group. I'm assuming their kind of top end number was somewhere around 9, maybe 8 to 10, and they got 9 as the kind of top group. The average mean size, like the average size of their groups, not specified. And was it a natural group? No. I'll talk about natural groups in a second. Okay, Froelich et al. Right, I love this. Number of focus groups, not specified. So we don't know. The size of them, probably 12. So apparently when they were writing up this paper, they didn't feel a particularly great need to be incredibly specific about their methodology, which I'm always like, man, when I write bad methodology sections, the peer reviewers tear me apart. And they really kick the shit out of me. So I'm like, how they got away with this, I never quite will know. But that's fun. So criteria, if any, 4 groups out of the 32 Quebec communities. Okay, so again, we don't know. Now this one is an insane, massive study, right? And you can kind of see, bless you. Focus group, 52 focus groups. Okay, to be fair, this is a team one, right? This is not, Kitzinger doing all of these focus groups by himself. This was a big study that was like groups of people, lots of collaborators, all sorts of, various locations, all kind of working together to get 52 focus groups. Okay, not the number or size of the groups, not specified, but they guess somewhere around 3, 9, or 10. So that's, again, a big range. And if you're getting between 3 and 10, almost guaranteed you were inviting 10 and then 3 people showed up. So that's always fun too. Criteria, if any, no. And this was a natural group, right? So they were all, they're all people that belong to particular communities. So we'll talk about natural groups in a sec. I said that already. Остановите, пожалуйста. Okay. So let it all, right? We see again here 4 focus groups. So way smaller than that recommendation that was made here, right? 10 to 15. Perfectly valid study, had 4 focus groups between 5 and 10 people. And again, almost guaranteed they wanted 10, and 5 people showed up to 1, and then somewhere between there for the other ones. So lots of variations in terms of how this is done, and I won't go through each of these in as much detail. 6 to 10 here, 8 groups. Each group had 2 sessions. Didn't specify how many groups here, but between 10 and 15, 5 and 9, and then 14 groups. So lots of variations in terms of people who've done kind of academic studies and the size and number of groups. So in a lot of cases, I don't know, there are no real rules, right? You're in a space where you can kind of bend and twist the rules. There are maybe some best practices, but you don't have to feel limited by them. Okay, so like I said, I was going to explain natural groups. How many slides do I have left? I said we might get out of here early, and I probably lied. Oh God, I definitely lied. Okay, 10 slides left, but some of them are question slides left over from when I used questions in this class. Okay, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. I'm sorry, I'm bad at time management in lectures. I think everyone who's taken a class with me will probably figure this out, is I get excited about certain topics and I overtalk them, and then I'm way behind. You're not doing as bad as my sociology of youth lecture, where I spent literally 27 minutes on a single slide just now, like an hour ago. And that was part 2. So I'm sure there's a solid 45 minutes on one slide. So it has 9 concepts on it. So we're doing okay. I'm bad at time management. I'm sorry. All right, so natural groups, right? These are people who already know each other or have had some kinds of interactions. This might be companies, biker gangs, clubs, groups, families, people in the same community. I think this one had what was this? Audience responses to media messages about AIDS. So they had but groups made up of specific groups, retirement club members, male sex workers, right? So, those kinds of things, right? These would all be natural groups. Okay, so obviously, if you're getting a natural group, it has to make sense for the goals of your research, right? If you get natural groups by accident, something has gone wrong in your recruiting process, and a bunch of people signed up to do focus groups with you, not because you wanted them to, but for other reasons. And okay, it's useful if the research is actually about how group interaction occurs. So there's that. All right, disadvantages. So obviously, if you end up in a group that already has hierarchies, right, or styles of interaction, what you can end up doing is reproducing those. And especially if you're in some kind of hierarchy, right, where there's some people in the community that are more important than others, right? This is the boss. I always think of if you tried to do, and I don't know that anyone ever has, because it would probably be suicidal. If you ever tried to do a focus group with members of the Hells Angels, right? There would be I don't know why you would try to do this. It doesn't sound like a great idea, but there would be a very clear hierarchy, right, of who is who and what their kind of interaction with each other is. Or let's say you did the military, right? You tried to do focus groups with military members. So they're a natural group, but there's already styles of interaction and hierarchies. And those could get in the way of you figuring stuff out, because people might be like, it's not my place to say, sir. I don't know. I assume that's how Army members talk. I've never been in the Army, thank God. Okay. The group may have taken for granted assumptions that may not be challenged. The other things that you can miss out on, if you're not part of these groups, if you are part of them, that changes things. But there could be like insider speak, insider knowledge, insider ways of interacting that you're not privy to, and you might be missing meanings because they're talking amongst each other in a language that you don't understand, or using terms, ideas, and all that stuff that you just don't understand. So there are advantages and disadvantages. Okay. Okay, so we talk about, doing your guide or figuring out what you're going to talk about in an interview, in a focus group. Generally speaking, you're going to have a smaller number of questions, right? And it depends on how much time you have people for. And again, I've seen focus groups where and these were exhausting, by the way, where the focus group went the entire weekend, right? So it was like a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday kind of series of focus groups. And so they had sessions, right? This was exhausting, and I do not recommend. It's really tiring. And you kind of, even as the moderator, there were moments where I would get sick of people in the focus groups because I'd spent too much time with them, and that was not as much fun. But usually, like for, let's say you're doing about a 2-hour focus group, which is pretty typical. Oh, by the way, two industries use focus groups a lot: politics and marketing. So if you end up going into politics and marketing, these are good skills to have because they use them a lot. Nope, still kicking. Okay, so yeah, you generally use a relatively small number of questions. Now, depending on the size of your focus group, this can be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. I would say on average, somewhere around 10 kind of, topic areas or questions that you want to cover in about a 2-hour period. Because again, like what's your goal? Well, your goal is to let as many people in the group talk and just, again, sort of follow those interactions between the group members, see how they're kind of bouncing off of each other, ask some follow-up questions, right? Ask for clarification, ask if anyone else has an opinion on what, Brandy happened to say. All of these things, right? But that takes time, right? And the bigger your focus group is, the more time it's going to take. So you really want a relatively small number of questions. I've always found that focus groups are a little bit more kind of hierarchical than interviews, right? Where you tend to follow your focus group script a little bit more closely than you would in an interview. Because maybe it's just the way I've organized them, is each question is sort of a distinct topic area that you want to get to. So it takes time though, yeah. And it takes time to open, clarify, refocus the group and all of those things. People need, breaks, people need food, people need beverages, all of that takes time. So you tend to use a small number of questions comparatively. Okay. Yeah, the amount of intervention you as the moderator takes, again, it's more of an art than a science. Depends on a lot of things, right? The topic under discussion, how much knowledge participants have, the goals of the research, but also how the conversation is going, right? If people are really resonating off of each other, it's a great conversation, people are having back and forth, lots of people are chiming in, your role is probably just going to be to kind of jump in here and there and sort of ask a new question, start a new path, keep your discussion on point so that you get the information you're looking for. As opposed to like a quiet group, you're going to have to jump in a lot more, right? You're going to probably have to drive forward the conversation. And like I said, it's a bit of a skill. As always, I'm terrible at silence. Silence can be a really useful tool for giving people some space to reflect. I'm really bad at it, but that's how I am. This slide is completely blank. I don't know. I think I added it because I wanted to write stuff one year, and I just keep forgetting to take it out. So I'm going to write. Okay. So, when we talk about our focus groups, what can we say that's interesting? So, yeah, I mean, because you're talking about, a large group of people or a group of people, generally there's less control over the discussion than an interview, right? It's going to range, it's going to wander off into weird spaces. You're going to get that one person that has their hobby horse that they really, really want to talk about, right? They really want to get off topic because they had something, they're interested in your general topic. That's why they showed up, but they had their little hobby horse they wanted to bring in. And, things are going to wander a little bit more in focus groups, typically just because of personalities. Are they building a new university out there? What are they doing? Okay.
That dentistry building has been under construction for
5 years?
I don't think I've ever been here where it's been open.
It's open now?
It's over now, yeah, because the
You can walk in.
building is getting torn down, so admin is now in the dentistry building.
Like the registrar's building?
Yeah, it's getting demolished.
It's actually a very good building.
Cool.
It's too open space. It's dramatic. It's unnecessary.
The open air makes me feel unsafe. I like my university space is small and made of bricks, so I feel trapped.
It does feel like the New York train station. It's like the scene where Alex Alliance cornered is surrounded by a bunch of police. Yeah.
Oh. Apparently, they're also retrofitting the biocide building, like they're gutting the whole thing and making it make sense. Apparently, I think.
They said the same thing about humanities, and we went to fire and still there. Oh yeah.
They didn't even clean it. I don't know what they did.
Really close for no reason.
What's that?
Made it close for no real estate staff in the first year.
Yeah, it was okay, great. We got all the asbestos out. We improved nothing else. It's awesome.
Before it was bad. Have you seen the biological sciences building?
Yeah.
It has not seen a remodeling since about this.
Well, this is the next one. They're closing it for 5 years to completely redo it.
I thought I wasn't going to find my way out of there. It's the same thing. It's bad.
All right, let's vibe about biosci after class. I hate that building too. I got lost in it many times. But I do want to get done because I promised I would finish early, and I'm a liar, as always. Okay, I'm almost there. I got 5 more slides. Okay, data. The data can be really hard to analyze. Focus groups are a little chaotic. Even transcribing focus groups is really hard. And I will say this: AI is far less useful when it comes to focus groups because it has a harder time distinguishing people's voices. So if you have, I find especially women's voices, AI is it's all Cindy. It's all the same person. So I do find AI is less useful here. Transcribing is really difficult, and it involves a lot of going back and listening to things over and over again to remember who was talking and try to figure that out. Oh, I will say this. This is a trick of the trade, which you could probably figure out because you're all very smart. The first thing I always do in focus groups is you do this, and this is helpful for the audio recording, is you have everybody in the focus group introduce themselves, tell your name and something about yourself. And the name part is so that you can associate their voice with the person, right? Because when I'm at the table, I've always got name tags for everyone so that everybody knows each other's names. But then I also want people to introduce themselves so that when I'm transcribing or I'm having someone else transcribe, it's hi, I'm Brandy and I'm a public school teacher and also a lesbian, right? So I swear this is how this person introduced themselves. I could have you listen to the tape, but I won't. Technically confidential, but whatever. But yeah, I always do that at the beginning so that transcribing, what their voice sounds like. Even if you do it days or weeks later, you can still kind of track who's who. Okay, personalities in the room. I talked about this already, right? But you've got different personalities. and you're going to have some dominant people, you're going to have some quiet people, and you got to kind of navigate between them. And yeah, difficult, sensitive issues, social hierarchies, strongly opposed positions can all get in the way. You can have in focus groups people get into like shouting matches with each other because they might get really upset with the other person's opinion. I've never had this happen, but I certainly know people who did, right, who got really, really, really upset. No, I know it never came to blows, but right, these strongly opposed positions, people might want to fight it out with each other. I haven't done like a post-COVID focus group either, and I feel like the world went crazy during COVID and has become more polarized, so I can't imagine what this would be like now. I'm scared. Okay. All right, we can do this quickly. So, online interviews and focus groups. These are great, actually. Online interviews are great. I love using like Zoom or Google Meets, or I mean, Skype is now being discontinued next month, but whatever, when Skype was a thing. What's that? You didn't know?
No.
Yeah, Microsoft is like, yeah, I guess we don't need Skype anymore, so Skype is going away. In favor of Microsoft Teams. That's their new product, so Skype is disappearing. Yeah. RIP Skype, the original online video chat platform. Mismanaged by Microsoft, like so many other things. Okay. What's that?
My original Roblox group chats were all on Skype.
On Skype?
Yeah, I actually established a YouTube channel where we used to like play Roblox, like we would literally do it through Skype, like screen recorded and everything. So wow, RIP Skype.
RIP Skype. Apparently you haven't done that in some time.
It's been like years.
There you go. Okay, yeah. So online, I mean, obviously online, people are just more comfortable, right? They're in their own homes. That works really well. People don't have to travel. That tends to help with people not showing up, right? Because if someone forgot to come to your focus group and it's like, oh, you send them a message and they're like, oh crap, just give me 5 minutes to like get my computer on, and they can join in. So there's lots of advantages there. Yeah, I mean, they're usually smaller. The one thing about online anything is it's much harder to manage because, you know, people will talk over each other, and it's different than in a room, right? Because it cuts audio off and all of these things, and especially Zoom, it like flashes to a different person's face or whatever. There can be a bit of a pain. Several responses at once, right? Flow can be difficult. People talking over each other. They can be a little bit harder to manage. The other thing, obviously, is when you don't know how much people are paying attention, right? Because, you know, they're a box and it's like, you don't, if they don't turn their camera on, you can't see their faces. You can tell people to turn their cameras on. They don't always do it. It is lovely for overcoming geographical issues, though. One thing that you can do with, obviously, we all know this, with online, is you could gather people from like all over Canada and you wouldn't have to pay for them to travel, right? So this is super useful when it comes to online stuff. Visual bias is reduced, right? You don't see kind of visual cues from other people, so it might not bias you as much. People won't, you know, react as much based on how other people are reacting to what they say. But I will say they're harder to manage, and often people just aren't paying attention, and it's hard to know what they're doing. Disadvantages. It's harder to establish rapport, right? More difficult to probe. You can't read body language. Higher non-response. I mean, it is easy for people to just not say anything and just kind of hide. Especially with cameras off, you can't identify distracted participants as easily, or even, you know, it can be hard to tell if someone's paying attention or not, or if they're checking their email or playing something, you know, Roblox or something on the screen. And yeah, connection issues can be hard. Recording, I will say this, one of the big advantages for online focus groups is recording and audio. Most of the online platforms now have built-in recording tools, and the audio tends to be really good, right? Because with even like the basic webcam that's built into your laptop, the sound is going to be mountains better than like a bunch of little microphones in a room, like in a boardroom. Really hard to get good audio in that kind of scenario. I know, I've tried. So recording and audio are a breeze online. Okay. Okay, this is the slides I keep meaning to take out. Why would you use ethnography over interviewing? Oh, you know what? To heck with that slide. To heck with this slide too. Sorry, these are slides left over. I keep meaning to take them out, and I keep forgetting because they're just kind of summary slides at the end of the chapter. I'll say, what are interviews good for? Sometimes you can't see things that you would in ethnography. People can tell you about the past. They're less intrusive than you hanging out at the furry convention. I had to get one furry joke in today. I couldn't let a whole class pass without talking about furries once. Longitudinal research is easier, right? Because you can kind of re-interview people over time, and that's much simpler than being in the field for a long time. You can talk about a ton of stuff, and yeah, you can address specific questions, things you might not observe out in the world. Okay, I did finish early, so it's 3 o'clock, and I'm going to say that's enough for today because I want to go see if my daughter. Yeah, we'll just erase that one. Why? And ethnography it's just one of those summary slides. Ethnography is better than qualitative interviewing. It's one of those weird quirks of this textbook. Every chapter is written by a different person, so they don't remember what the last person said.
What is continuity? I don't know.
It's actually, this isn't the worst one. The textbook I used in Youth, Crime, and Society
I think I was in that class.
had like every chapter was written by a different person. And so the amount of repeated information in each,
Beyond.
it was like, okay, yes, we all know about the Youth Criminal Justice Act because this is a textbook that has a whole chapter about the Youth Criminal Justice Act.
It mentions it in